Raising foster children how-tos. Hi, my name is Jen Avellaneda. If we haven't met yet, I've been a biological parent for 27 years. I also was a teacher for 7 years, and I personally think I've raised some pretty successful, amazing, incredible, kind, and compassionate adult children. However, as I became a foster parent, I realized that raising foster children can be a little different than raising biological children. And so today, I just want to share with you some of the things I've learned along the way. Let's get started and make sure to stick around till the end for my final thoughts. So why is raising foster children even different than raising biological children? If I've done a really great job as a bio parent, shouldn't I be also an excellent foster parent? Well, here's a couple of reasons why maybe raising foster children is a little bit different than raising biological children. The first thing is that foster children, a lot of them have been exposed to drugs or trauma or alcohol in utero. So that means in the mother's womb, when they were being formed and created, their brains and their bodies and their whole entire systems have been exposed to something that could have altered in some way, maybe their physical development, maybe their cognitive development or their emotional development. And so those children, they may act or behave or have different responses to things. Sometimes that's easy to see immediately as soon as they're born. And a lot of times when these kids get to be about school age, you'll start to see maybe some struggles that they may have with maybe learning disabilities or behaviors or their emotions. And so that's just one reason why raising a foster child might be a little different than raising a biological child. Another area may be that these kids who've been in foster care, they've experienced a lot of trauma. A lot of them have been abused or neglected. They've been moved from home to home, and that can really mess with the child, with their brain and their development and their understanding of who they are, and it can just make parenting a foster child a little different. And so you may have to do things different than you would with your biological kids simply because of the trauma or the impact of different moves and maybe their ability to attach or their understanding of what a trusted adult looks like. So let's just jump into it. 7 raising foster children how-tos. The first one would be setting clear boundaries. And I know that we do this anyway as we parent our biological kids. If we have them, we know to kind of give these kids margins and understanding of what is okay and what's not okay in a home. But foster kids, imagine a lot of these kids have come from homes or situations where they've kind of had free reign. They maybe could run around and maybe just eat sugar all day, or where really there's not a lot of consistency. You know, they may be really quiet and make a peep and then they get smacked, or maybe they're really awful and screaming and yelling and then they're ignored. And so they really don't know maybe how to behave, or their understanding of boundaries and what is okay and what's not okay. It could be different when they come into your home, or it could have changed from foster home to foster home. And so another good way is that as soon as a foster child comes into your home, to let them know, right? Like, we have certain rules, and that may be, you know, not touching someone's body without permission, or no name calling, or no hitting, or whatever that looks like for your home, so that that child understands that there are clear boundaries that need to be stuck to when they enter your foster home. One area where we see a lot of testing of these boundaries would be in the area of food or sleep. So imagine a child that maybe hasn't eaten in 3 days, right? They come to your home, they're starving, and they may eat and eat until they're gagging and they throw up. Or maybe a child has had no control. They just got removed from their biological family. They are angry. They don't know how to express their anger. And so they scream and they yell and they stomp for a certain meal. And as a foster parent, loving and kind and trying to help, you make the meal that they recommend. But next thing you know, that child refuses it. They reject it. They maybe even throw it on the ground. That child isn't angry at you. All it is using any kind of control that they have over their environment. So we'll see this with food, and we will also see it with sleep. Kids refusing to sleep or struggling to sleep, or, just showing a lot of struggle with boundaries and consistency when it comes to sleeping and with eating. Foster kids also can struggle with physical boundaries. They may not have had boundaries where they were before. There may have been unsafe issues, and so they need to be taught what safe touch is, what respecting other people around them are, how to speak to the people that are around them. They also, another area may be their emotions. Maybe they have used their emotions to manipulate the environment around them. It's just something not to be afraid of or scared about. It's just something to be aware of as you get ready to have a foster child, that certain kids may need a little bit stricter boundaries than maybe other kids or maybe your biological children. So number 2, and hopefully this isn't contradicting number 1. I think hopefully it's adding on to it. But this is number 2, is to be flexible but not rigid. And what I've seen that can be the most damaging to foster kids is rigidity. So it is where every move they make, it gets targeted, it gets blamed or attacked or disciplined or punished. And foster kids, they need a little bit of say over what they think and how they feel. They need someone to be flexible with what their needs are in that moment. And I know for you or I, there are days where, I may not feel like the same person. I may want one thing one day and not another day. And even in me, as someone who has had a general stable past, there's days that I feel different and I have different needs. So imagine a foster child that's had a real sporadic or crazy or unsettled past, that they may have days where they need you to be just a little bit flexible, not with the strict boundaries of your home or the safety of your home or the safety of the child, but over general, smaller matters about your house, so that they can understand that they have a little bit of say, as long as it's within the compounds of what you agree and what's okay for the general family that's living in the home. The third how-to in raising foster kids is to let that child teach you who they are. And I know with biological kids, we have a lot of understanding of who our kids are, right? They may behave a certain way, and then we're like, oh, that is exactly something they learned from me, or, oh, that's what I used to do when I was a kid, or, they take after Uncle Jack or, Aunt Thelma. And so we can kind of pick and choose biologically, but also our parenting. They've had a consistent parenting styles, and they've modeled what they've seen. But foster kids are so unique because, one, we don't understand the biological traits that may have come down through the generations to our foster kids. And 2, maybe they've been parented in 4 different homes, and each one of those homes have modeled something different and taught them different ways to behave. And so when a foster kid comes into our home, a really great way to gauge and to let them teach you who they are is simply ask questions. Ask them what their preferences are, what their interests are, what their likes and their dislikes are. Ask them, what kind of sport do you love? What do you love to draw the most? Who are your favorite people in your life? Who are maybe not your favorite people in your life? And let them start to tell you who they are. And before you know it, you will be able to form a picture of the likes and the interests of these children, and you will be able to better parent them because of it. One example is we got a little girl in our home from the hospital, and generally babies I cuddle and I love and I wrap them up, and we want to surround them with love. We get a lot of company and family and friends, and they all want to hold the baby. However, this baby didn't particularly love being held all the time. She was a child that really just needed some space. She wanted to observe a lot what was going on around her, and when she's right up in your neck and you're cuddling her, it was hard for her to do that. She wanted to see what was going on. She really wanted time and space to process her surroundings. And so, at first it kind of felt offensive. Like it was like, what? You don't want me to hold you? And, I didn't really understand it. But over time, what I realized is this is just the personality of this particular baby. And so what I needed to do was just to watch her, to really gauge and to understand who this child was and what her needs were. And today, this child is 3 years old, almost 3, and she is an excellent teacher. She's really no different. She has times where she needs a lot of loves and cuddles, but there's also times where she just wants space to really play or explore or to figure things out. It's who she is. And so I needed her to teach me who she was, even though I was her foster parent. Number 4 how-to is to use creative discipline or parenting methods. And what this might look like is, generally, if a child behaves bad, maybe your biological child, what do? You say, go to your room and think about what you did, or wait till your dad comes home, or come down when you're done crying. But for foster kids, sitting alone in a room can create a lot of feelings. It can create fear that someone could come in and hurt them. It could create, feelings of rejection because they were removed from their biological family. And so again, they're isolated and they're alone. It can create a lot of anger, like they're unwanted or they're unloved. And so in that situation, another great example might be to let that child sit next to you. And so instead of a time out, that child can do a time in. They can sense that you're close. Maybe they don't get to talk and, play with their favorite toy, but they know that you're near and that they're safe and no one's going to harm them. And so that's one example of creative discipline for a child. We had another child that she had stole a whole bunch of things, and we wrote this big list, and she was working really hard to pay us back for the things that were on this list. But right before she got ready to move, we took this list, went to the sink, and lit this list on fire. Before you think, what were you thinking? First, this was an older child. It wasn't a younger child that could be in danger. But second, what we wanted to teach this child was that there was a greater understanding of what grace and mercy look like. In life, none of us get what we deserve. In life, we are all sinners falling short of the glory of God. We all make mistakes. We all do things that we know we shouldn't do, and yet we keep on doing them. And so what I wanted to teach this child was that she was loved and she was forgiven. And although there was a debt that she could have and maybe should have paid, that there is a grace and a mercy and a love that covers over that. And so that understanding, I wanted her to know, and it was more important to me that she understood the concept of grace and mercy more than I deserved or earned or even wanted a few dollars that she had taken back to me. And so that's just another example of creative discipline, to really think outside of the box of what that child needs most, and then just think creatively about how you can meet the needs of that child in maybe non-traditional ways. Number 5 is to praise and encourage these kids often, and I talked about that in another video. I will try to find it and link it below in the comments or the description below. But basically what I had said and what I still stand by is that kids that come into foster care, they are a lot of times like cars that are running on empty. A lot of them maybe even are running on fumes and barely are spudding along. And so unlike biological kids that maybe they know at the very core of their being who they are, whose they are, and that they are loved and valued and that they have worth, a lot of times foster kids, they just don't know that. And so they need you to encourage them and to give them praise. There is a big difference between like blanket praise. So you might hear a coach on a football field say, good job, oh, nice, and kind of blow them off and give this blanket praise. But what foster kids I found need most of all is very specific praise. So that might look like, I like how you were so slow and careful when you penned the letters of your name. Or I like how you saw that the little boy next to you wanted to play with your truck and you decided to share your truck with them. These kids need you to be a mirror of all the good traits in them, because I assure you a lot of these kids, they have heard the negative things about who they are. They have been attacked and maybe even hurt because of the things that they do wrong. They need someone to see and to call out the things that they do right. And you as a foster parent get the privilege and the honor of doing that. Number 6 is let these kids stumble. Don't rescue them. And so what does that mean? What does that mean is we're setting boundaries, we're doing creative discipline, and we're trying to parent these kids uniquely to how they need to be parented. I know for me, a lot of times I tend to want to rescue kids. Maybe a child forgets their lunch and they go to school. My natural tendency is to make them the most healthy and incredible lunch and cut the little sandwiches, maybe in little heart shapes, and wrap it all up and write a note and then drive it to the school and hand it to them. That's my instinct. But what these kids need to learn and what would benefit them most is to realize that there are consequences to these behaviors. Sometimes maybe even their parents hadn't learned that if they behave a certain way, there is a certain consequence. And that can be a detriment to these children, that they can think, I do something, but I won't get the consequences that come with that behavior. And so an example of a natural consequence for forgetting their lunch might be that they go to school, they say, I forgot my lunch, and that they are given, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a little thing of milk. They eat that and they kind of compare with their friends of what they're eating, and they're kind of just sad and disappointed. Their basic needs are still met, but they're not getting the reward of you jumping every time they do something negative or wrong or maybe even forgetful. And so this can be a super hard one, and you never ever as foster parents want to let them have a natural consequence that would harm them or maybe let them not be safe. So let's say they miss the bus and it's dark out because it's the middle of winter. You wouldn't want them to walk a mile in the dark to get to your house because you don't want to rescue them. I mean, that is just not safe and it's not wise. You would definitely go pick them up and, handle that a little bit differently. Or if it's freezing out and it's snowing and, they forgot their coat, they just are going to freeze. Like, that is not the loving, kind, natural consequences that I'm talking about. I'm talking about consequences that don't affect their safety or their mental or emotional health, but where they can observe and sit back and watch and realize that the decisions they make, they will have consequences, sometimes now, but also sometimes impacting their future. And the number 7 how-to is to play with these kids and let them be outside as much as they possibly can. Oh, these kids come and their minds are tangled like a web. Sometimes they can't even articulate clear thoughts because they're so filled with maybe sorrow or grief or emotion. So when these kids are outside, there's no ceiling, there's no walls, there's no parent that they're going to be afraid of. They can just relax. And when they're relaxed and their basic needs are met, they can unravel their thoughts and they can begin to process and begin to heal. We have seen some of the most incredible healings in foster kids by just letting kids be kids, letting them dig in the dirt or swing on a swing or run around the yard with a chicken or laugh and giggle as they kick a ball around in our front yard. These kids sometimes, their childhoods have been robbed from them. Sometimes they have been busy parenting younger siblings, even as young children. Sometimes they've been parenting their own biological parents that have been under addiction or kind of oppression. And so these kids sometimes just really miss out on the opportunity to be kids. And so I encourage you, play with these kids, have a lot of fun with them, laugh and giggle, and just don't be afraid to let them be kids because they will astound you at how quickly they begin to heal and to grow and begin to communicate their thoughts and their feelings as a result of it. And these are my final thoughts. As you hear all these ways that we can parent foster kids, it can maybe feel a little overwhelming. You can compare this maybe with how you would parent your biological child or a different child that doesn't come from a history of abuse or neglect or trauma or exposure. However, at the end of the day, these foster kids, they are really not that different from your biological kids. These kids are just children. They need a safe place to live. They need a family that loves them. They need to feel like their needs are met and a place where they can grow and become who they are meant to be. So I just want to encourage you, don't be afraid of these foster kids. Engage and welcome them into your home. You may parent them a little different. You may have to get creative, but you will learn and you will grow from them. And it is worth it to take a foster child. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, subscribe below. Go out, live bold, be brave, and we will see you next time.